Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of A.A. Entertainment. Today I will be discussing my personal favorite actor of all time, Lon Chaney Sr., also known as the Man of a Thousand Faces. Growing up, Lon Chaney Sr. was the child of two deaf and mute parents, and the only way he knew how to communicate with them was through sign language, and not only would that help him in his home life, but that would also build the foundation of his career. In the early stages of cinema, before sound and dialogue were synced with the camera and visuals, Lon Chaney would use his experience to convey the deepest and most profound emotions in a most subtle and realistic manner. Aside from that, he also proved to be quite talented as a makeup artist, hence his nickname the Man of a Thousand Faces, giving audiences nightmares to this day. He was also a very talented contortionist and stuntman. In a career spanning just short of 2 decades, he has over 160 acting credits and 7 directing credits. So for today, I will be discussing my top 10 favorite films from The Men of a Thousand Faces. At number 10, Laugh Clown Laugh. Laugh Clown Laugh is a heartbreaking tearjerker that treats its story and subject matter in an incredibly mature light, even by today's standards. Released in 1928, Laugh Clown Laugh begins as a traveling clown named Tito, played by Lon Chaney, and his partner, Simon, played by Bernard Siegel, who made an appearance in another Chaney film, The Phantom of the Opera, as a mysterious sewer dweller who was seen cleaning a mannequin head. During their travels, Tito comes across an abandoned baby girl whom he adopts and names Simonetta, after his best friend Simon. Tito then trains adult Simonetta to act in the circus, in which he is played by another Hollywood legend, Loretta Young. One day, Simonetta decides to explore the countryside and pick a rose, in which she comes across a wealthy count named Luigi. After her legs get tangled up in barbed wire fence, Luigi takes in the young Simonetta and assists her and obviously falls in love with her. We later come to learn that both Luigi and Tito are seeing the same psychiatrist, as Luigi, who has lived a life of wealth and overindulgence, laughs uncontrollably at stressful situations, whereas Tito, who has always lived in poverty and lives by making others laugh, cries uncontrollably. The two then meet and become very close friends, but as the love between Luigi and Simonetta flourish, we come to learn Tito is hiding his love for Simonetta, as he knows it is wrong. Now before I continue, what I love most about this movie is 1. The fact that instead of indulging on the creep or fetish factor of Tito's love for Simonetta, Tito knows for a fact it is wrong and does whatever he can to hide it. Also, instead of portraying Count Luigi as a rich and spoiled prick, Luigi is honestly a really down-to-earth, unlikable character, and is not only very kind to Tito, but even offers to step aside so Tito can have a chance at love. This film is absolutely beautiful and heartbreaking, and aside from the score, the characters are very down-to-earth and likable, and even though Lon Chaney is mostly praised for scaring the hell out of people, he also really knows how to bring an audience to tears through his empathetic portrayal of a complex character. At number 9, The Unholy Three. If my 10th entry was too melodramatic for you, then have no worries, because not only does this movie star the Man of a Thousand Faces, but it was also directed by the same guy who gave us the movie Freaks, Todd Browning. For this entry, I am including both versions of the film, the 1925 and the 1930 versions. The Unholy Three is a strange crime thriller about a trio of circus performers who decide to give circus life a break and instead focus on a life of crime while utilizing their experiences from the circus. Both films include Harry Earls as Tweedledee, who would later star in Freaks, Gobble Gobble, and Lon Chaney as Echo, a ventriloquist. However, whereas the strongman Hercules would be played by a different actor in the 1930 remake, the trio decided to run this circuit in the disguise of an innocent pet shop, ran by an elderly woman, played by Chaney, and her son, Hercules, but with a different name, who are also raising a baby who was Tweedledee in disguise. Interesting fact, Harry Earls was 24 when he made this movie, meaning that baby in the movie The Unholy Three is older than I am right now. Once the customers start having problems with their talking parrots, the elderly woman visits the homes of her wealthy clients with her baby and later rob the houses. Both versions are from the same director and are almost identical, although the reason why I chose both versions is because the 1930 version is the only film in which we get to hear Lon Chaney actually talk. So yeah, if you ever wondered what the Man of a Thousand Faces sounds like, there you go. The Unholy Three is a beautifully bizarre film which offers both Jean-Luc Godard and John Waters vibes, shrouded in a gothic atmosphere. That, and it's very amusing to see tough guy Chaney dress up like somebody's grandmother. At number 8, London After Midnight. London After Midnight was considered to be an officially lost film for decades, alongside A Blind Bargain, another Chaney film which is still lost to this day. But thanks to Turner Classic Movies, we have a 47-minute cut of the film, which consists of existing stills of the original 1 hour and 10-minute cut, and an amazing score by the Wojciech killer of silent cinema, Robert Israel. But seeing the circumstances film archivists were dealing with, it is a very enjoyable and entertaining film to watch. Directed by the legendary Todd Browning, London After Midnight is a murder mystery that takes place in an old haunted house. Picture it, Sicily, 1926. A man is shot in the middle of the night and a detective, also played by Lon Chaney, as well as family and friends of the man, go to investigate. The man is a wealthy figure in the upper class, and his death is ruled a suicide, though many are skeptical of the idea. 5 years later, 2 spooky-looking tenants take up residence in the abandoned mansion. On one, a top hat-wearing ghoul with razor-sharp teeth, played by Lon Chaney, in what is perhaps his most ghoulish character, and a goth chick who nowadays would probably be played by Eva Green and would really dig Susie and the Banshees. The 2 ghoulish figures, who only seem to walk around at night, begin to raise suspicions amongst neighbors and passers-by. Once again, calling on Professor Edward Burke, Chaney's detective alter ego. I remember first seeing this film on Turner Classic Movies at 4 o'clock in the morning on school night, and was super excited because I remember hearing about how this film was for the most part lost. And don't let the still photographs and short runtime deter you. This film is absolutely nightmarish, and both Lon Chaney and his vampire girlfriend, played brilliantly by Edna Titchener, are the types of figures you would either see in an E. Elias Meraji movie or that VHS tape from The Ring. But for those of you who would want to see a more faithful version of the original cut, I highly encourage you to check out Mark of the Vampire, which stars Bela Lugosi in Chaney's role and is directed by the original London After Midnight director. Even though Bela Lugosi doesn't have the same makeup as Chaney, he's fucking Bela Lugosi and is always amazing. At number 7, The Unknown. Okay, I know for a fact somebody's starting a GoFundMe just so they can get me to stop repeating these following words. Starring Lon Chaney and directed by Todd Browning. Yes, I shit you not. The Unknown is about as Lon Chaney and Todd Browning as it gets. I'm also beginning to realize the 2 are the OG Tim Burton and Johnny Depp. I would also like to point out why the 2 work so great together, as Todd Browning grew up as a circus performer and was indeed a contortionist, and Lon Chaney was an actor who specialized in makeup and, well, put his body through hell. An actor and a director always need positive chemistry and similar visions. The Unknown is another circus drama, but instead of ventriloquist acts, Lon Chaney's character, Alonzo, has no hands, so his act revolves around him throwing knives with his feet. He and a strongman, played by Norman Carey, who previously starred alongside Chaney in The Phantom of the Opera, are competing against a fellow Connie, played by a young Joan Crawford. One night, in a fit of rage, Alonzo strangles his sweetheart's father, which she witnesses, somewhat. Spoiler alert, Alonzo only pretends to have no arms, even though he very much does, and Nanan, Crawford's character, only spotted the killer's hands. So this means Alonzo's in the clear, right? Actually, the killer has a peculiar genetic anomaly. One of his hands has 2 thumbs. So Alonzo makes the simple and brilliant decision of seeing a surgeon to remove his thumbs. I'm just messing with you. We're dealing with Chaney and Browning. Alonzo asks the surgeon to chop off both of his fucking arms. At this point in the film, Nanan seems to have her heart set on strongman Norman Carey, and Alonzo decides to come up with a plan that will rip off both of Carey's arms. The Unknown is a very strange, dark, morbid, and twisted tale, and that right there is always welcome in my book. Coming in at number 6, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Victor Hugo seemed to have been quite the influence in early Hollywood cinema, as he gave us the source material that would become 2 of the most influential films of the silent era. The Man Who Laughs, which would be used as an inspiration for DC's The Joker, and The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Though neither are horror films, the makeup job, especially Chaney's, has given many moviegoers the chills. The Hunchback of Notre Dame, as I already mentioned, is based on the classic Victor Hugo novel and revolves around a deformed hunchback bell ringer for the Notre Dame Cathedral. And much like Gothic stories and films, The cathedral is as significant as the lead character, which is what actually drove Hugo to write the novel. Lon Chaney chews up the scenery in every minute he's on screen, as he helms his most memorable role alongside Eric, the opera ghost, as Quasimodo. I absolutely enjoyed this film as a kid, not only due to Chaney's makeup, but also his acrobatic and parkour skills. With heavy makeup, including a large plaster hump on his back, Chaney knows how to use it to his advantage as the mistreated and tragic Quasimodo, while also performing stunts that would put Tom Cruise to shame. Much like the equally tragic Victor Hugo character Gwynplaine, Quasimodo, at least in this version, is often praised as a horror movie icon, but with many of his other films, instead of playing a character, Chaney empathizes with his role and finds out what he and his character have in common, and cathartically projects his own personal heartbreak and frustration onto said character. Though this next film is not as significant as some of other Chaney's films in his career, it is certainly in my top 5. That is The Shock. Released in 1923, The Shock is about a cripple who is dispatched by a group of blackmailers to San Francisco to expose a crooked banker. While in San Francisco, Chaney's character embraces the beauty of the city and sees an opportunity to turn his life around and leave the underground crime world. He even comes to fall in love with a lady. The only problem is that said lady is the banker's daughter. Under pressure from his crime boss, Queen Anne, new dirt is found concerning the crooked banker, and Chaney is forced to act fast while trying not to get his new love involved. Oh, and I should mention that there's a massive earthquake during the climax. The Shock may not sound like much, but it is certainly one of Chaney's most outstanding and dramatic roles. Next up, He Who Gets Slapped. He Who Gets Slapped is a 1924 film with a bizarre yet pretty linear plot aided with surreal cinematography. In this film, we are first introduced to Chaney's character, not as a clown, but in the midst of a rag-to-riches story of a former homeless scholar who creates a brilliant invention and is commended for it. Unfortunately, this is a Chaney movie. The very man who promised to take Chaney's character away from his financial difficulties is not only sleeping with his wife, but also patents the new invention under his own name. This is where the title comes into play, as when Chaney, but I'm going to refer to him as he from now on, as that is the clown's name, is slapped both by his wife and his colleague whenever he tries to stand up for himself. Driven to the brink of madness, he leaves his new life behind him and becomes a clown for a circus. His most famous act includes him being slapped across the face repeatedly. He then falls in love with a fellow circus performer as his past begins to catch up on him and finds a new goal, that being to help his love find a better path in life. And by the way, an ape escapes and goes bananas during the climax. He Who Gets Slapped is definitely a bizarre film, but is very apt and the visuals are absolutely astounding, including strong visual metaphors and a bunch of clowns dancing around the equator of planet Earth. Ladies and gentlemen, here comes the big one. At number 3, The Phantom of the Opera. Considered by many to be the Man of a Thousand Faces magnum opus, The Phantom of the Opera is based on the groundbreaking Gaston Leroux detective novel, but cuts back on the detective aspects and embraces the horror elements. Even though I first fell in love with the legend of the opera ghost when I first saw the musical with Gerard Butler, I almost immediately fell in love with this adaptation, especially with Chaney's grisly makeup that sure as hell gave me nightmares. This shoot was anything but easy, as not only did the film alternate between a minimum of 4 different directors, including Lon Chaney and 8 screenwriters, Chaney's makeup for the skeleton-looking opera ghost was absolutely excruciating, damaging his eyes, nose, and gums. For those of you who are unaware of the story, and if you are not, shame on you, The Phantom of the Opera is about an opera ghost by the name of Eric who haunts the Paris Opera House and kidnaps up-and-coming singer Christine Daae. This is perhaps the most faithful adaptation of Leroux's novel, down to the makeup job. Between the settings, visuals, and especially the makeup, this movie never left my mind. Another interesting fact, nobody had any idea what the opera ghost looked like behind the mask, with the exception of a handful of production crew members. So yeah, if you were to see this for the first time back in 1925, you were in for the scare of a lifetime. And as for Mary Philbin, who played Christine, she didn't know what Chaney's makeup looked like, so her expression of terror was 100% genuine. For both horror fans and esteemed film critics alike, The Phantom of the Opera is one of the greatest films alongside Citizen Kane. Not to mention the performances bring the roof down. Also, just a side note, apparently after Lon Chaney passed away at the age of 47, His ghost was said to have haunted Soundstage 28 in Universal Studios, which is where the movie was shot, in an eerie case of life imitating art. At number 2, The Penalty. Even though Lon Chaney is mostly well known for his talent as a makeup artist, he was also a very talented contortionist and stuntman, and in my opinion, no other film demonstrated that as exquisitely as this. In one of Chaney's most violent and grisly roles, he plays Blizzard, a bitter underground crime boss who had both of his legs amputated by a quack doctor when he was a young boy. Even though they don't show it, that scene still sends chills down my spine. In an attempt to get revenge on the very doctor who needlessly crippled him as a boy, Blizzard decides to get brain surgery to alter his behavior. This film is absolutely brutal, and even though I didn't see it till I was, I think, 12 years old, I do remember seeing a snippet of it in a documentary called Universal Horror, which is narrated by Kenneth Branagh, and I highly recommend it, where Chaney, after screaming at a group of female workers, he grabs one by the hair and pulls at it. I should also bring up that in Martin Scorsese's Hugo, Sacha Baron Cohen pays homage to the film by climbing a ladder without the use of his legs. For an honorable mention, I will be discussing another lost film, and that is A Blind Bargain. The last supposed surviving print was supposedly burned in the same vault fire that claimed the better portion of London after midnight, although A Blind Bargain was pretty much completely destroyed. I first came across this film in a book called Legendary Horror, which featured a gargantuan picture of Lon Chaney as a werewolf type of creature inside of a cage, reaching out in what appears to be an attempt to tear a person limb from limb. This also sparked my curiosity for lost films, as my disappointment grew and grew when I learned that my attempts at finding a copy were fruitless. According to IMDb though, Lon Chaney plays two characters, a mad doctor and an ape-man, and that's pretty much all we have for a plot. But luckily, during my research for this video, I came to discover that a 190-page book was published through Magic Image Film Books, which is a reconstruction of the film by Philip J. Riley in 1988. Just by looking at Chaney's makeup, I can already tell that this film would have gone down as one of his greatest roles alongside Quasimodo and Eric the Opera Ghost. At number 1, The Monster. Definitely not as well renowned as some of Chaney's other roles, but The Monster is not only one of my favorites of Lon Chaney's career, but it's also one of my absolute favorite horror films of all time, which includes some of the most absolutely spine-tingling scenes ever put on screen. The film stars Johnny Arthur as a detective wannabe who assists in an investigation revolving around a car crash and a missing body, which somehow leads to an abandoned insane asylum. Though starting off on a creepy note, the movie begins to play off as an oddball comedy like Laurel and Hardy. After Johnny leaves a dance party, heartbroken by his sweetheart, he sits by a tree in the middle of the storm and is confronted by an unknown lunatic, which Johnny follows to the abandoned insane asylum. After Johnny's girlfriend and date for the night end up in a situation mirroring that of the investigation, the three of them end up inside of the dark insane asylum, which is being run by a mysterious Dr. Zizka, played by Chaney. The three are given rooms for the night in this supposed haunted asylum, while being assisted by the asylum's violent patients. After being separated and even drugged, the three come to discover Dr. Zizka's evil plan, which involves holding a mirror out in the middle of the road on a dark and stormy night, causing unsuspecting travelers to crash and land in a ditch. They are then kidnapped by Zizka's cronies to be used in gruesome experiments. Like I said, The Monster is not as famous as Hunchback or Phantom, and as much as I love those movies, The Monster is an incredibly spooky and eerie watch with very effective scares. The cinematography and score are brilliant, and if you need a really good scare for Halloween, this is my number 1 recommendation. Born April 1st of 1883, the man of 1,000 faces died in August of 1930 at the age of 47. Lon Chaney is an absolutely brilliant actor who I greatly admire. Thank you for watching this. Please like and subscribe this video, and comment down below which is your favorite Lon Chaney film. Have a great Halloween.